where we transform your stack of research into clear, synthesized knowledge. Today, we're tackling one of the most complex public health challenges out there, the biological underpinnings of major depressive disorder, or MDD. For way too long, the public conversation has been stuck in this binary. Is it situational, or is it purely a chemical imbalance? So our mission today is to cut through that. We're going deep into the sources to find the verifiable biochemical and structural changes tied to MDD.
And then what actually works.
And then, yeah, what the clinical evidence says actually works, from classic meds to, well, cutting-edge gut interventions.
It's absolutely critical. Because the sources are clear, the narrative has fundamentally changed. Depression isn't seen by researchers anymore as solely a psychological thing.
Or just situational distress.
Right. It's a disorder that involves complex, measurable changes across multiple biological systems. We're not talking about one single cause. It's more like a cascade of failures. So we'll move through these theories, starting small with molecules, and then work our way all the way up.
Okay, let's unpack that. If you've ever heard anything about depression, you have probably heard about the monoamine hypothesis.
Oh, yeah. That's the foundation.
It's the foundation upon which so much modern pharmacology was built. But it's also, where the first big cracks in our understanding start to appear.
It is. I mean, the classical hypothesis is pretty straightforward. Depression is caused by a deficit of monoamine neurotransmitters in the brain.
So we're talking about serotonin, dopamine.
Exactly. Serotonin, which is linked to your mood, sleep, appetite. Then you have norepinephrine, tied to that fight or flight response, and dopamine, which drives motivation and pleasure.
So the logic was simple.
Yep.
If the levels are low, we just give drugs that boost them, right?
Precisely. And that's what the early SSRIs, the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, do. They very quickly increase the amount of serotonin in the synapse, that little gap between neurons.
But that's where the paradox comes in.
It's a massive paradox, and it's what forced researchers to question the whole theory. The chemical levels go up in hours, but the person's mood, that can take 4 to 8 weeks to improve. That's the famous therapeutic lag.
So the key isn't the initial chemical bump, it's what happens after the bump.
Exactly right. Proponents of the theory now suggest that lag is because of a slower secondary process called autoreceptor desensitization.
That sounds complicated.
It just means the brain basically needs weeks to realize, hey, I have too much serotonin, and then it shuts down some of its own internal regulators. Only then does the actual firing pattern change in a way that helps with depression.
Okay, but you said the theory has been heavily criticized since the 90s. What's the biggest scientific nail in the coffin for that simple serotonin deficit idea?
It's just the inconsistency of the evidence. I mean, if a lack of serotonin causes depression, then if you take healthy people and you pharmacologically deplete their monoamines,
They should become depressed.
they should. But they don't. At least not consistently, unless they already have a genetic predisposition. The sources are really clear on this. The popular idea that depression is just a chemical imbalance is simply not supported by the scientific evidence.
It's much more complex.
Far more complex. It's about the brain's reaction to the chemicals, not just the raw quantity of them.
Which means we have to look past the molecules floating around and look at the actual hardware, the brain's structure.
Yes, and this is where neuroimaging has been a game changer. It lets us peek inside the living brain and see what's physically different.
And what we're seeing is shocking.
It truly is. We see measurable physical changes. Multiple studies consistently show gray matter reductions in several frontal regions. This is especially true for the hippocampus.
The hippocampus is central to memory, but also managing long-term stress, right? The HPA axis.
That's its crucial role here. The finding that the hippocampus shows atrophy, that it's shrinking, lines up perfectly with animal models where chronic stress is applied.
So chronic stress is literally shrinking the part of your brain that regulates stress.
It seems to be. It suppresses what's called hippocampal neurogenesis, the creation of new neurons, and that leads to a visible loss in volume.
Let's zoom in on a few other key brain areas. First, the amygdala. What's its role?
The amygdala is the brain's alarm center. It processes emotion, especially fear and threat, and in MDD, it's very often hyperactive.
The alarm is stuck on.
Exactly. It explains that emotional bias you see in depression, the tendency to focus on negative things or to see a neutral face and perceive it as hostile. The alarm is just on high alert constantly.
Okay, and then you have the prefrontal cortex, or PFC. That's supposed to be the adult in the room, right? Regulating those alarms.
Precisely. The PFC governs high-level thinking, judgment, emotional regulation, what we call top-down control. And in depressed individuals, it's often hypoactive. That control is impaired.
So the amygdala is firing wildly, and the PFC isn't stepping in to say, hey, calm down.
Right. And what's so fascinating is that antidepressant treatment seems to work, in part, by restoring activity in the PFC. The medication is helping the brain regain control over its own alarm system.
And finally, there's this one small but really powerful region, sometimes called the sorrow spot, the subgenual cingulate.
Or Brodmann Area 25. It's a critical hub, it's packed with serotonin transporters, and it acts like a governor for huge networks controlling appetite, sleep, mood,
All the core functions that go haywire in depression.
all of them. And in treatment-resistant depression, this area is metabolically overactive. It's firing way too much. It's like the brain's emotional anchor is stuck in the on position, driving dysfunction everywhere else.
That's a perfect transition because we've gone from molecules to specific locations. Now we need to see how these locations talk to each other.
Which brings us to the large-scale brain network theory. This really helps explain the experience of depression.
It moves beyond just single spots on a map.
It does. We're looking at three key interacting circuits. First is the Central Executive Network, the CEN.
Sounds like the brain CEO.
It kind of is. It handles high-level tasks, working memory, planning, decision-making. When this network is deficient, you get that impaired functionality you see in depression, where even making a simple choice feels impossible.
Decision fatigue on a whole other level.
An extreme level, yes. The network for doing things just isn't engaging properly.
Okay, the second network, the salience network, seems tied to that constant worry and anxiety.
It is. The salience network's job is to detect and direct your attention to what's important, what's salient. In depression, it's often hyperactive.
Like a threat scanner set too high.
Perfectly put. It's constantly flagging negative things and directing your attention to worry and threat, whether it's real or not.
And the third network really captures that classic symptom of rumination getting stuck in a negative thought loop. The default mode network, or DMN.
The DMN is what's active when your mind is wandering, when you're thinking about yourself. It should be active when you rest, then turn off when you start a task.
But in depression, it doesn't turn off.
In patients who ruminate, not only does it stay on, it shows increased activity and connectivity. It gets stuck.
And here's where it all connects, right? The DMN gets stuck by talking too much with that overactive sorrow spot, the subgenual cingulate.
Exactly. The two regions are over-communicating, trapping the person in this recursive self-critical loop. The system meant for reflection becomes a generator for negative self-talk.
So we have this hardware dysfunction. Let's link that back to the molecules. This brings us to neuroplasticity.
Right. The idea that chronic stress physically reduces the brain's complexity and its connections.
Impaired neuroplasticity. It means the brain loses its ability to adapt and rewire itself.
Yes, chronic stress literally shortens the dendritic trees, which are the branches that let neurons talk to each other. The brain is struggling to form new connections.
But here's the hopeful part. Antidepressants might work by reversing this physical damage.
It seems they do. They don't just add serotonin, they seem to act as a kind of brain fertilizer.
Brain fertilizer.
We see molecular evidence for this. There's a protein called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. It's essential for the growth of new neurons.
Okay.
And blood levels of BDNF go up significantly with successful antidepressant treatment. It correlates directly with symptoms getting better. The medication seems to be helping the brain heal and rebuild itself.
That mechanism of stress and system repair leads us right into the next big theory, systemic inflammation.
The inflammation hypothesis is gaining so much traction because it bridges physical and mental health. The first clues were really stark.
What were they?
When patients were treated with interferon therapy, which is a treatment that causes intense systemic inflammation, they frequently developed classic symptoms of depression.
So inflammation in the body was creating what looked just like depression in the brain.
Yes. And now we have meta-analyses to back it up. We consistently find increased levels of pro-inflammatory signaling molecules, these cytokines, in the blood of MDD patients.
And how do these immune signals mess with our mood?
Well, when these cytokines cross the blood-brain barrier, they can manipulate neurotransmitter systems. They can even cause what researchers call sickness behavior.
Sickness behavior.
Think about when you have the flu. We're tired, you withdraw socially, you lose your appetite. That's sickness behavior. And it mirrors core depressive symptoms almost perfectly. Your immune system is revved up, and your body goes into conservation mode.
And what's causing this chronic inflammation?
The sources point to a few big ones. Chronic trauma, sleep problems, poor diet, smoking, obesity, all things that put the immune system into this chronic, low-grade, detrimental state.
This takes us to what might be the most revolutionary field in all this research, the gut-brain axis.
The gut-brain axis, or GBA, is this bidirectional communication superhighway. It connects your digestive tract and your central nervous system.
So it's more than just a nervous stomach.
So much more. It's the recognition that the trillions of organisms in your gut, your microbiome, are constantly talking to your brain.
Through what? The vagus nerve?
The vagus nerve is a huge physical pathway, yes, but the microbial products themselves are also affecting our signaling. For example, when your gut bacteria digest fiber, they release metabolites like short-chain fatty acids.
SCFAs.
Right. And these aren't trapped in the gut. They cross the blood-brain barrier and help regulate neuroinflammation and synaptic plasticity. They're key regulators of the very systems we just talked about.
And we can actually see a difference in the gut of depressed patients.
Yes, there's clear evidence of dysbiosis. The gut microbiota composition is observably altered in MDD patients.
And things like stress and antibiotics can make it worse.
That's the alarming part. Psychological stress or a course of broad-spectrum antibiotics, which just wipes out microbial diversity, have been correlated with a higher risk of depression years down the line.
Wow. Okay, let's pivot to the clinical reality. We have this amazingly complex picture, but when someone needs help, what does the evidence say actually works?
The systematic review we looked at, which covered over 140 interventions, gives us a very clear baseline.
And it's maybe a little sobering.
It is. Only one type of treatment is supported by high-strength evidence for general efficacy. Second-generation antidepressants like SSRIs and SNRIs.
But you said the benefit is statistically small.
It is. The standardized mean difference is around MECLA score 0.35. In plain English, that means the drugs are reliably better than a placebo, but the average patient only experiences a small beneficial effect.
So why are they still the first line of defense?
Because of the reliability and sheer volume of that data. The evidence base is massive, but that benefit has to be balanced against the harms.
The side effects.
Exactly. SGAs have a statistically significantly higher rate of people stopping treatment because of adverse events compared to placebo. It's about 4.5% versus 2.6%. Nearly twice as many people quit because of the side effects.
That's a huge burden. Okay, what about non-pharmacological options? What holds up to that standard?
Only one. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, has moderate strength evidence proving it has similar efficacy to SGAs. Head-to-head trials show almost identical response rates, around 45%.
So if a patient doesn't want medication, CBT is the single most reliable, evidence-backed option.
It is, but there was a surprise in that moderate strength category.
What was that?
The herbal remedy, St. John's wort. It's also supported by moderate strength evidence for general efficacy compared to a placebo.
And how did it compare on side effects?
That's the crucial difference. Patients on St. John's wort had a statistically significantly lower rate of quitting due to adverse events than those on SGAs. The side effect profile was much milder.
So we've got SGAs, CBT, and St. John's wort as the three big established players. What about everything else? Acupuncture, Tai Chi, all those supplements?
Unfortunately, the vast majority fall into the low or insufficient evidence category. The studies just aren't big enough or rigorous enough to draw firm conclusions. The knowledge gap there is still enormous.
Okay, finally, let's circle back to the gut-brain axis. What do the trials say about things like probiotics?
The initial data is very promising. Probiotics or symbiotics seem to lead to a significant alleviation of depressive symptoms, especially when used as an adjunct, in addition to standard medication.
Yeah, powerful add-on treatment.
It seems to be. But the other GBA interventions, they aren't there yet. Prebiotics alone showed no better results than placebo, and fecal microbiota transplantation, or FMT, is still very early stage.
So what's the final takeaway here? We've gone from molecules that don't tell the whole story to brain regions that are physically damaged to the entire immune system being involved.
The crucial shift is this. We have to abandon the simple chemical imbalance view. MDD is a systems disorder. It involves measurable structural changes like hippocampal atrophy, dysfunctional circuits like the DMN driving rumination, systemic inflammation.
And now, this huge regulatory role for the gut microbiome.
Exactly.
And for anyone listening who's seeking reliable treatment, the path is pretty clear. The strongest evidence supports SGAs and CBT. But clinically, the next step has to be weighing patient preference against that evidence.
Which is a huge challenge, given that psychological treatments and even options like St. John's wort are associated with fewer people quitting due to side effects, and that combining treatments is already common practice.
Like probiotics plus antidepressants.
Right. The provocative question is this. How should future research prioritize investigating the combined long-term effectiveness and harms of these multifaceted treatment plans? Is combination therapy the future? And if so, how do we prove it?
Something for you to explore as you continue your deep dive.